Good morning. This is the morning from the New York Times for Friday, July 31st, 2026. I'm Sam Sifton, and I'm glad you're here with me today, because we have a remarkable edition to get through, one that begins with a stunning announcement from the White House, moves into a deeply reported investigation that may change how the military thinks about brain injury, and then carries us across continents and into the culture pages before I sign off for a 2-week vacation. Let's begin. President Trump said yesterday that his so-called Board of Peace had reached a disarmament deal in Gaza. The board statement read, "For the first time, Hamas officially has committed to an actionable plan for relinquishing all its weapons, which will be followed by Israeli withdrawal from Gaza." Neither Hamas nor the Israeli government commented publicly on the claim. The Board of Peace, you'll recall, is a Trump-appointed panel tasked with brokering a ceasefire and disarmament framework, but details on its composition and authority have been sparse. If confirmed, this would represent a seismic shift in a conflict that has defied resolution for months. We'll be watching for verification and reaction in the hours ahead. But I want to start today with the United States Coast Guard, and with a story that Dave Phillips, who covers the military and veterans for the Times, has been building toward for years. Dave has written about artillery crews who fire high-powered cannons day after day, about Navy SEALs who train with shoulder-fired rockets, about fighter pilots catapulted from aircraft carriers, and about fast boat crews pounding across open ocean. In each case, he's documented a pattern: repeated exposure to concussive blast waves, not a single explosion, but thousands of smaller ones, leaving distinctive, pervasive brain damage that looks nothing like classic traumatic brain injury and everything like a slow, invisible unraveling. Now Dave has turned his attention to the Coast Guard's surfmen, the crews of the 47-foot motor lifeboats who train and operate in heavy, crashing surf to save lives. They are among the most elite small boat handlers in the world. And they are, Dave reports, taking a beating from the ocean that almost no one in the service is tracking. "A 20-foot wave breaking on you is like being in a car crash," a surfman named Aaron Harris told Dave. "If you are out training in big surf, that's like 20 car accidents a day." Harris spent 22 years on the boats before retiring in 2024. He's one of the lucky ones who made it out. Many veteran surfmen describe a constellation of symptoms: headaches, memory lapses, anxiety attacks, nightmares, mood swings, cognitive problems that look for all the world like brain injury. But the Coast Guard has no regular testing protocol for brain injuries. It delivers no formal briefings on the dangers of pounding waves. The website it maintains on brain injuries is more than 10 years old, and Dave found that many of the links under the heading "Where to Get Help" are inactive. The surfmen are alone. Dave's story centers on Brett Bonner, who served 21 years driving rescue boats and saved hundreds of lives. Bonner developed post-traumatic stress disorder during his service, and after he retired in 2022, his life came apart. He struggled to make decisions, even ordering at a drive-thru became overwhelming. He grew paranoid, convinced his father-in-law next door was out to get him, and punched him over a minor disagreement about closet doors. In February 2025, Bonner shot himself. His wife and 4 children saw it happen. He left no note. Bonner's eldest child, Kaylee, was 18. And what she did next is extraordinary. Searching for understanding, wondering whether her father's work in the unrelenting surf had something to do with his decline, she built a 36-question survey and sent it to every surfman she could locate. Nearly 80 active and retired surfmen responded. A vast majority reported symptoms nearly identical to her father's: headaches, sleeplessness, memory loss, anxiety, violent mood swings. Some were getting worse. "My brain has started to fail me. I feel it, I see it," wrote one responder in his early 50s. "It is difficult to do things that used to be natural to me." Another, in his mid-40s, "It has been a struggle for me to keep my life together." Kaylee wrote up the results as a senior-year high school research project. It earned an A, and Dave says he'd have given it an A+. She plans to share her findings with the Coast Guard. I spoke with Dave yesterday about what to make of all this, not just the Coast Guard, but the Navy pilots, the SEALs, the Army mortar soldiers, all those exposed repeatedly to concussive blasts in service to the nation. Here's what he told me. "I think the big takeaway is that these injuries are preventable. There never needs to be another story like Brett Bonner's, even if we will always need Coast Guard crews to brave rough waters. On these motor lifeboats, most of the damaging exposure occurs during training, not in emergencies. The same is true in the rest of the military. That is both infuriating and a stroke of good luck, because training is a controlled environment. We can change it to limit damage. If anything is going to change, though, the first step is recognizing that there is a problem. That has been tricky because these types of brain injuries develop slowly and often resemble other mental health problems. For decades, the military has been stuck in a cycle where it doesn't see these injuries as a problem, and therefore isn't on the lookout for them. I hope the reporting the Times has done can break that cycle. That reporting, Dave's series on brain trauma in the armed forces, has now documented the same pattern in artillery crews, SEALs, Top Gun pilots, speedboat crews, and now Coast Guard surfmen. In each case, the damage is pervasive, distinctive, and largely ignored by the institutions that ask these men and women to endure it. Dave's complete article is linked in the newsletter. It's free to read, and I urge you to make time for it. Let's turn to Europe. Spain mobilized its military yesterday after thousands of migrants crossed, some swimming, into Ceuta, a Spanish-governed peninsula on Morocco's coast. Ceuta is a 6-mile-long sliver of land that Spain has governed for centuries, and the arrivals have fueled political tensions on the mainland. In recent days, 1,500 migrants had entered, but Thursday's numbers were so large that the Spanish government announced it had mobilized the military to assist with border control and humanitarian response. Jason Horowitz reports from the scene that the scale of Thursday's crossings caught authorities off guard, and the political ramifications are already reverberating in Madrid. Meanwhile, Europe burns. Climate change is an important factor in this summer's wildfires, experts say, but so is the continent's shift away from farming. As Raymond Jong reports, the giant wildfires in France and Spain are the largest on record for those countries, roughly 100,000 acres each, bigger than all but 6 of last year's wildfires in the American West. Studies confirm global warming is driving southern Europe's increase in sprawling, fast-moving fires that create their own weather. But there's another factor. In parts of Europe, a generational shift away from agriculture has left vast landscapes untended, allowing fuel to accumulate. We must learn to coexist with them, one report concluded. On the Greek island of Crete, a wildfire forced thousands to flee and killed 2 firefighters, the latest in a series of blazes that have charred Europe this summer. Nikki Kitsantonis reports from Athens that more than 220 firefighters were battling the blaze in the Krya area, driven by strong winds. Greece is also working to contain fires on Lesbos and in the Peloponnese, where another firefighter died. It's a brutal season across the continent. War in Ukraine. Russia pounded Ukrainian cities overnight with a barrage of missiles and drones that killed at least 8 people and wounded dozens. President Zelensky said 5 members of a single family were among the dead. The attack pushed Russia's use of ballistic missiles to a new monthly record, 126 fired in July alone, surpassing the previous record of 118 set in February. Constant Mihut reports from Kiev that Moscow appears to be capitalizing on Ukraine's dwindling air defenses in a summer campaign of large-scale aerial assaults. And during that assault, a Russian missile crashed in Poland. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte called it a violation of Poland's airspace by a Russian missile and vowed to strengthen alliance defenses. Lara Jakes and Constant Mihut report that the incident raises the possibility of a confrontation with NATO, to which Poland belongs. Russian missiles have briefly entered Polish airspace before, but investigators have yet to definitively identify the object that struck overnight. This incident is yet another reckless act by Russia and a dangerous consequence of its war against Ukraine, Rutte said. Now to the Trump administration. An appeals court is still considering the legality of President Trump's White House ballroom project, a lavish expansion of the East Wing entertainment space, but construction is racing ahead, as new photos show. The project has drawn legal challenges over funding and procurement rules, but the White House appears to be treating the court process as parallel to, rather than a constraint on, the build-out. The administration also exempted natural diamonds from its latest batch of tariffs. Anna Swanson and Gina Smielek report that the carve-out followed negotiations with European officials and months of advocacy by the Antwerp World Diamond Center, which dominates the global industry. It also followed a remarkable gift, a ring encrusted with 321 diamonds, designed personally for Mr. Trump and presented by the Antwerp Group a few weeks earlier. The exemption raises familiar questions about who receives lucrative tariff exceptions and why. And Todd Blanche's nomination to be Attorney General suffered a severe blow yesterday. Trump threatened to withdraw Blanche's name rather than scale back a tax immunity deal that would benefit the president and his family, as demanded by 2 Republican senators, John Cornyn of Texas and Thom Tillis of North Carolina, neither of whom is returning to Congress next year. Glenn Thrush, Michael Gold, and Carl Hulse report that the threat followed 24 hours of frenetic, fruitless negotiations. "I have no objection to withdrawing my nomination," Blanche said in a statement, if that is what the president believes is best. Two Republicans have now threatened to block Blanche's confirmation, and the nomination appears to be in freefall. In politics more broadly, Elon Musk, a year after a huge blow-up with Trump and the Republican Party, he even threatened to start a third party, appears to be back in the fold. Theodore Schleifer reports that Musk has authorized his super PAC to spend $100 million to $120 million on a new field program in at least 8 states to help elect Republicans in November. The planned injection of cash from the world's richest person could reshape the midterm battlefield. New York Mayor Zoran Mamdani said this week he supported reparations efforts for black New Yorkers but that it was too early to commit to direct cash payments. In an interview on The Root, Mamdani said he'd have to wait for the city's Commission on Racial Equity to complete its report, but he acknowledged the city's complicity in slavery. We often think about slavery and the complicity of the South, but New York City was the capital of slavery in the North for a long time. And in Texas, 3 parents sued to force the state to block and remove posters with the 10 Commandments from public school classrooms before the school year begins in August. The lawsuit argues that state laws on religious freedom and parental rights conflict with the new state-mandated displays. The posters have already survived federal court challenges, but this suit takes a new tack under state law. Other big stories. Anthropic revealed Thursday that its state-of-the-art AI models recently broke into the systems of 3 outside organizations, a surprise disclosure 9 days after rival OpenAI reported a similar incident. Mike Isaac and Kate Conger report the attacks date back to April and were discovered during an internal review spurred by OpenAI's disclosure. Anthropic did not name the affected organizations but said it informed them this week. The revelations heighten fears about AI safety as these systems grow more capable and autonomous. The U.S. economy slowed in the second quarter, expanding at an annual rate of just 1.5%. Talman Joseph Smith reports that the war with Iran upended prices, supply chains, and energy markets. Oil prices have receded from spring peaks, but higher prices for gasoline and petroleum-based products are still hitting households and businesses. Persistent inflation and uncertainty over the Federal Reserve's plans pushed up bond yields this week. And in Georgia, Cullen Gray, the father of the teenager who killed 4 people at Appalachia High School in 2024, was sentenced Thursday to 15 years in prison after a jury found he bore criminal responsibility for his son's attack. Rick Rojas and Johnny Kaufman report that prosecutors argued Gray gave his son, then 14, the rifle used in the shooting and failed to act as the teen's mental health deteriorated. The son, Colt Gray, was sentenced to life in prison earlier this week. In the opinion pages, Maggie Haberman joined Ezra Klein on his show to discuss Doge, Iran, and her new book with Jonathan Swan, Regime Change, which Klein calls the single best book on the first 14 months of Trump's second term. Haberman describes the ferocity and energy of those early months and how much has shifted since. The conversation is worth a listen. And Lydia Polgreen writes that Vivek Ramaswamy could be the Republican Party's future, but first he has to win. Her column traces his trajectory from biotech entrepreneur to presidential candidate to potential kingmaker, and the tensions between his ideological purity and the practical demands of electoral politics. A few morning reads before we continue. Candies marketed as better for you have taken over grocery stores, gyms, and supplement shops. But are they actually healthy? Our piece on semi-sweets digs into the marketing, the ingredients, and the nutrition science. At an Alabama airport, TSA officers discovered 5 Civil War-era cannonballs inside a passenger's checked luggage. The inert relics, some as big as a grapefruit, were detected in a routine X-ray scan. The lead officer's first thought, I couldn't see a fuse and need to get some help quick. They turned out to be historical artifacts, not live ordnance, but still, quite a carry-on. And off the coast of Australia, a drone captured what may be the first ever aerial footage of a humpback whale giving birth. Wildlife photographer Alexander Forrest, 20, noticed an unusually slow whale during the annual migration along the Humpback Highway off northern New South Wales. He flew his drone and hit record. The footage shows a vivid red plume of blood in the water, then the calf emerging, a spectacle rarely witnessed, let alone filmed from above. Yesterday's most clicked story in the morning was about toxic wastewater bubbling out of the ground in Ohio. The state is a major importer of fracking wastewater, pumped underground but not always staying there. In historic Marietta, radioactive wastewater has risen to the surface through older oil and gas wells. The city is fighting back. Today's number, 22. That's how many hours it could take to fly nonstop between Sydney and London when Qantas launches Project Sunrise next year aboard specially manufactured Airbus jets. The route would become the world's longest commercial flight. Laura Chung reports from Sydney that a test flight last week covered 12,460 nautical miles in 24 hours and 24 minutes from Melbourne, no passengers, just a proving run for the ultra-long-haul era. Sports. FIFA announced plans to allow private investment in its tournaments, essentially selling stakes in the World Cup to private investors. In response, European nations threatened to boycott the World Cup. The decision came at a virtual meeting of UEFA's 55 member associations on Thursday. UEFA later confirmed the stance, saying it and its members unanimously opposed the plan, which FIFA wants approved by September 19. The standoff could reshape global football governance. In the WNBA, Seattle Storm co-owner Celeste Keaton was suspended and fined by the league after an exchange with two teenage girls wearing shirts depicting XX and XY chromosomes, a reference to the debate over transgender athletes. The girls were at the game supporting Indiana's Sophie Cunningham, who recently said it's common sense to bar transgender athletes from women's sports. Video of the interaction showed Keaton approaching the girls, cursing, and calling them insane. The Storm apologized Wednesday. Recipe of the day: Christina Felix's spicy tuna and avocado tostadas, a cross between tuna salad and guacamole, perfect for a hot summer night. Canned tuna in oil makes it cheap and accessible, but if you happen to run in tuna fishing circles and someone hands you a fat loin off a fish caught that morning, use that instead and experience nirvana. On comedy, Mary Beth Barone has a new Netflix special, Galaxy Brain. Jason Zeineman calls it darkly ironic, a pleasingly prickly hour, equal parts wry and righteous. Barone ends by calling for a grassroots women's movement to win the next election. Step 1, on dating apps, stop swiping right on men with more conservative politics. I did the math, she says. If every single woman has sex with about 1,000 moderates, we might be able to win this thing. She pauses, clenches her fists, flashes what Zeineman calls the most deluded-looking smile of the show. It's a joke, but it lands with a sting. More culture. Alyssa Wilkinson reviews Penny Lane's new documentary Wild Inside, a collective tribute to Flaco, the Eurasian eagle owl who escaped the Central Park Zoo in 2023 and became a celebrity, a symbol, a main character for a city that needed one. When he died a year later, he was mourned like a star. The film starts with Lane's characteristic curiosity and winds up as something deeper, a portrait of a community forged in shared attention. And Sadie Stein, rereading the Little House book she loved as a child, finds herself no longer Team Pa. Once a Pa supporter, she now finds herself firmly Team Ma. The shift reflects a grown-up recognition of the labor, resilience, and quiet authority that held the family together on the frontier. The Morning recommends, move to Fremont, California, by one account, the happiest city in America. Stay hydrated and you'll reduce your headache risk. Cop a squat on the sidelines of Junior's next soccer game in an excellent camping chair tested by Wirecutter's peripatetic seating investigators. And take our news quiz. Games, today's spelling bee, yesterday's pangram was toughin'. And the mini crossword, Wordle, connections, crossplay, and strands are all waiting for you. Thanks for spending part of your morning with the Times and me. I'll be on vacation for the next 2 weeks, experiencing a life of magic and chores. My colleagues will write to you while I'm gone. Stay frosty. Sam. A quick correction, yesterday we wrote that Washington Dulles International Airport is in Washington. It is actually in Virginia. That's your briefing. See you in a couple of weeks.